welcome to our political journalist Q&A. My name is Janai Gaston. I am the president of the SIUC chapter of the National Association of Black Journalists, and I am pleased to introduce Maya King from the New York Times and Brittany Gibson from Politico. So I'll let them go ahead and share a little bit about themselves, and then we can get started.
Okay, well, I can start us off. My name is Maya King. I'm a politics reporter for the New York Times. I'm based in Atlanta, and I cover politics and campaigns in the Southeast. So I focus largely this year in the 2024 race on the battleground state of Georgia, and I also do some coverage of North Carolina and trends relating to Black voters nationally. Before I joined the Times in 2022, I was a reporter at Politico with Brittany, and I covered race and national politics there. So really glad to be here.
Hi everyone, I am a campaigns reporter at Politico, doing a little bit of everything on the campaign trail, mostly on the presidential race this year. I mostly have been on the third parties beat for this cycle, but since late summer have just been a little on all campaigns and doing a lot of labor and union vote and campaign reporting.
All right. So just to just get us started, can you tell us how you guys got into political reporting?
I can take this one. First, mine was totally by accident. After college, I was applying to jobs and ended up with one job in DC at a smaller magazine called The American Prospect, and really just got sucked into DC and political reporting. It was in fall of 2019, and within a month of moving to DC, Trump had been impeached by the House for the first time, or the inquiry had started. As the vote happened or the inquiry had started, and I just got sucked into Capitol Hill and political reporting ever since then.
And I guess my journey to political reporting, it was something that I wanted to do really from the time I was quite young. My parents were very huge political junkies and always had the news on. And so I can remember being in high school and watching 60 Minutes with my mom and thinking, oh, I would actually really like to do that one day. And I went to school in Washington, which also kind of stoked my interest. So I knew that I wanted to cover either policy and pair that with the impact of that policy on real people's lives, or cover a campaign. And so I had the chance to do that after I graduated from college. I took an internship at Politico, and it was on the heels of the 2020 election that we all thought before COVID was going to be, sort of a standard presidential race between Trump and Biden, and it was anything but. But yeah, that was sort of my foray into things.
To say the least.
Yeah.
Could you guys just share a little bit about how you navigate political reporting? Because given that politics is such a heavy topic, I'm pretty sure there's some hoops and hurdles you guys have to jump through when it comes to reporting on it.
Well, I think right now, since we're in the last, month of the campaign, it's just sort of constant action, and there's always a hoop to jump through. I mean, not necessarily in terms of just having to be, I guess, challenged internally, but more just, figuring out what are the final stories that we can do, who are the best people to talk to for those stories, and how accessible are they at this stage, especially if you're trying to get closer to the campaign and form relationships with people who work on these different campaigns. Since we're just so close to the election, it's kind of hard to do that. And this is really just like a test now of sourcing and stamina, making sure that you have the right people to talk to, but also that you're still able to kind of muster up the energy and the thinking to do the right stories. So it's just sort of an ongoing, all-encompassing moment, I think, on the trail. And Brittany, you're just coming from the being out in the field, so I can only imagine.
Oh yeah, well I know you've been on the road a bunch too, and that's what I think you mean when you're talking about stamina. definitely a factor. I would agree with everything Maya said and just add as well that because there's limited time, for us as campaigns reporters right now, there's an ongoing question with ourselves, I think, and also with our editors and newsrooms at large of what are the stories that must be done before election, and really prioritizing and having editorial judgment about what is worth the time, not just to work on and report and write about, but maybe to travel to, maybe to really expand what is going to be a live blog post. You've probably seen on Politico and the New York Times, the shorter blog or chatters. What is a enterprise story that's going to take a couple of days? What's the final investigative push that's going to take more bandwidth, and really making sure that those decisions make sense for the impact that they'll all have in these final 3 weeks. Also, sorry, yeah, coming from a reporting trip, I am in a Whole Foods if you're getting background music.
All right, just one more question for me before we turn it over to our audience. Just how do you balance the work-life balance that comes with being a political reporter?
I always get this question about work-life balance, and the truth is, when you're a political reporter in an election year, there really isn't much of one. You just try to take the rest where you can. Certainly, none of us are machines, and we don't necessarily have to just push ourselves to the absolute brim. But like I said, I mean, this is a time where we're working 6 to 7 days a week, and working a lot of nights as well. So I just try to carve out some time, to make sure that I'm checking in with my family, make sure that I'm cooking myself like a healthy meal, working out, exercising, moving my body. And those are kind of the basics right now of self-care. And I'm just trying to take it where I can. I think the job right now of just covering politics, like I said, doesn't really yield itself to a ton of work-life balance. And I think for me, also living in the story and being in Georgia has forced me to really get creative because living here, I feel like I'm always in the story and sort of always working, or even just in my community observing how this could be a political story. So I've had to really make sure that I have friends and community outside of just journalism. But it's harder. It is harder, and I would say anyone who aspires to be a political reporter, it is definitely rewarding. It's a great job, and it's super fun to cover. An election, definitely an honor. Also prepare just to be on quite a bit.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I really care a lot about work-life balance. I think it's like my European side. I take my PTO and I don't feel bad about it. The only thing I would add is that you'll know your beat. You can be a political campaigns journalist, and Labor Day to Election Day, you're going to work 6 or 7 days a week. Count your comp time. Take it out with your manager after. But this is go time. But the same way as if you were a congressional reporter about this time last year, you were basically camped out in the Capitol waiting to see if Republicans were going to pick a speaker. And that was your go time. And now that Congress is out of session, you have a little bit more bandwidth on this end. Same thing if you're a White House reporter. When Congress is in the home stretch of passing a major bill, bipartisan infrastructure act or IRA or CHIPS or something, your go time when Congress is considering all those bills and the president's priorities in committee, and it's we're months away. That's the time to kick back, or work on the enterprise, work on the investigations, take your comp time or your vacation. You'll know your beat, and I think it's just a matter of being flexible and knowing, okay, I'm a congressional reporter. August recess is a good time to take time off because Congress is out. If I'm a campaigns reporter, I'm not taking off in October. And it's just learning the beat in that way.
Hi, Brianna.
Oh, hold on 1 second. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
All right, Brianna, if you just want to share a little bit about yourself and what you cover and how you got into political journalism, that would be awesome.
Yeah. Sorry, sorry, apologies. I'm so late. I'm in a parking lot somewhere in Georgia on assignment right now and might not have good signal. But I am a deputy.
I can't hear her anymore. Can you guys? Okay.
Brittany, I think you're Brittany. Brianna, I think you're
Oh,
having a connection problem.
maybe
Okay.
try without your video.
Is that better?
So far.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, I'm gonna like move a bunch of apps and see if any of this is done. How about now?
Yeah, you're good.
So good. Okay. Okay, so if it improves, I'll come back on camera. But yeah, so the 2024 election, the voters, the candidates, obviously what decision that they'll be making and why and what's driving them, but their fears or motivations. The first
Brianna, you're cutting out again.
and what is or isn't motivating them to the polls.
Oh,
We'll just give her a minute to come back. All right, well, while we're waiting for Brianna to come back, we'll just turn it over to our audience so they can ask us a couple questions.
I assume you both attended the National Association of Black Journalists convention back in August. I was curious, as I'm sure you're aware, Donald Trump agreed to appear at that convention, but Kamala Harris did not. How did those decisions impact the way you considered both of those campaigns in their relation to the press, or specifically Black journalists?
Brittany, you should go first since you actually are a leader within the organization.
Oh yeah. So Brianna and I are both. She is chair and I'm vice chair for the political task force for which is like a subcommittee at NABJ. So I wasn't involved at all with that decision making. Honestly, it didn't change how I viewed the candidates in their relationship to the press or Black journalists in particular. I'm glad that both of them ended up taking questions from our organization. I think that's really important, and it's a precedent that goes back to the founding of NABJ. So I know Trump was very controversial. A lot of the membership was split, and I had a lot of fun conversations with folks at the bar in Chicago about whether Trump should be there or not. I was pro. He's got a 50-50 chance of being president. I think he should have to come to NABJ and answer questions the same way basically every other nominee for the last 40, double check my math, however many years have been invited to NABJ. And so for me, it was just like net neutral. It didn't have a big impact. I'm glad Harris was able to schedule something after the convention. Um, just logistically, I know it's very difficult for the campaigns, particularly post Butler, Pennsylvania, to schedule these very big live events. You know, granted, the Chicago event and the Philadelphia event were indoors, which I understand it makes it slightly easier, but it's difficult for the campaigns. It's difficult for NABJ. But I think it's important that whoever's running for president, as with tradition of the organization, gets their invitations and comes to NABJ to answer questions by our organization and our journalists. But I wasn't involved in the decision. I followed it along like everyone else. And it was Trump spoke on the fly-in day, so I wasn't even there. So, you know, grain of salt from me.
I agree with everything Brittany said. I have the same opinion. You know, we are a journalistic organization, and so we should want to hear from the people who want to run the country and ostensibly will be beholden to the press. I think the bigger thing that I was looking at was how do these candidates now engage with reporters in tough questioning once they are on stage? And of course, we had two very different experiences with Trump at the actual conference, you know, sort of having like some really, really tense back and forth with some of the panelists, and Harris being in a much more controlled environment in Pennsylvania, away from sort of the rush of the national convention. It was just two totally different experiences. I will second what Brittany said and say that I'm glad that the campaigns made their candidates available to us this year.
Oh, there she is. Hi, Brianna.
Hi.
All right. Do you just want to share a little bit about yourself and how you got into political reporting?
Is this me specifically or?
Yeah.
Okay, can you say that question one more time?
Can you share how you got into political reporting and a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Hopefully I don't cut out, so I'll be quick. I didn't always choose politics. It wasn't my first ambition. I actually thought I was going to be a music journalist. I used to always read the Rolling Stone and had in my head that I was one day going to take Matt Tabby's job, and it was going to be my name on the newspaper, near the magazine. But I think by way of how I was raised and the questions that I had about society and the world around me kind of naturally led me to it. I'm a military kid. I always talked about politics with my parents, people in power. I grew up in a pretty suburban place, but also had a lot of family that were from deeply or predominantly Black cities. All my family's from Baltimore. So I just thought about things through experience, but also looked at things through a lens of being a very transient kid with a lot of different friends and backgrounds. And I actually started getting into politics when I moved to DC, and I started working for a startup called the BDC with Tiffany Cross, and we covered with the intention of covering Congress and members of Congress who were people of color, and specifically people of color. So that is kind of my segue into political reporting, which is being on the Hill, not knowing much about specific DC government, as well as just how Congress works broadly here and how things get done behind the scenes. But also thinking about, one, the members of Congress who aren't covered as much as your, typical senator or the lack of representation in Congress, but also digesting what that is and making it digestible for other readers who may not, pay attention to politics all the time, or may not understand what their representative is doing on the Hill, or what kind of bills and legislation that they're introducing, and how that might trickle down and affect them on a day-to-day basis. And so my goal was just to make the complex less complex, but also not hide the ball from readers, and just make it very clear how their members are working or not working for them, and bring a lot of light and storytelling to members who don't necessarily have, day-to-day coverage, who are not, Speaker of the House or getting a lot of attention into what they're working on and what they're pushing and what kind of policies that they're pursuing and how that might affect readers and constituents.
As we get closer to the election, how stressful would you guys say it has been just keeping up with like all the new developments with the political election?
I would say it's kind of feast or famine right now. There are some moments during the day where if the news is on a beat that's not yours. So here in Georgia, there have been times where the focus, at least of my newspaper, is on all the battleground states, but for a day, maybe there's some huge news out of Pennsylvania or Michigan. So I have a little bit more time to work on like longer term stories or just stories that are going to take me like 1 or 2 days. And then, this week is really not that because former President Trump was in the state last night. The vice president will be here on Saturday. And in between, there's just a flurry of activities related to both Georgia politics and also Black voters. So it's been just pretty nonstop. Um, and it can be, I mean, I guess it's stressful, but also, it is, you're just in it. It's also kind of exciting. I feel like I'm still learning things. You're still out and able to talk to folks. So you're moving around constantly. You're not sleeping as much as you would like, or I will say I'm not sleeping as much as I would like. But it is, it's not like the worst thing ever, at least not yet.
Yeah, I would echo that and just say like it's fun. Like to a certain degree, this job is really a privilege. Being a political reporter, being the person that responds to the news on their beat in this presidential campaign, like that excitement is a positive part of the job. I would say. Yes, it can be stressful. Sometimes it's annoying. I think all major news stories should start on Monday, not Saturday. That would be my ideal preference, but in general, like it's fun. That's part of the job, and that's what makes the job exciting when it's unpredictable and you're jumping on things and moving quickly.
Yeah, I would just add everything that Maya and Brittany said. It's stressful, but I think it makes it better when you realize that you're all in it together with your colleagues. Like you're all going to be tired. You're all kind of in the weeds, spread out across the country, or just constantly on the Hill every single day. There will be early mornings and late nights, and in a way, we all know what we're getting into. But it is exciting because every single day you're talking to new people, and so much can still change in the next 20 days. That it's really important to be open and mindful to what you're reporting out, and not assume anything about voters and their what they might be indicating that they're leaning towards or their inclinations. But you're always learning as well. Like I don't have a day where I don't pick up something new or it doesn't lead me to a new idea. And that kind of curiosity, I think, is just what makes it so much fun. Even when you haven't eaten in like 10 hours or you're, slept like 5 hours, you're reinvigorated, I think, when you are talking to people and you know that you've got a good story, you're asking the right questions and it's leading you somewhere. You may not know where it's going, but it's leading you somewhere and you're just chasing that down.
I got in a few minutes late, so I didn't get an opportunity to hear how Maya and Brittany, how did you guys get started into political writing? I don't want you to backtrack, but I missed that part. That was late.
Just could you say the end of that a little louder? Sorry, I didn't really hear.
She asked, specifically Brittany and Maya, how'd you guys get into political journalism?
Oh yeah, sorry. My story is a lot like Brianna's. I just ended up with a job in DC and got pulled into it.
And I had dreams of covering politics for many years. I came from a household of just very like news savvy and politically engaged parents, and so once I decided to go to college in DC, just kind of dove in headfirst in trying to understand the city, and it was always something that I wanted to cover either from a policy standpoint or on the campaign trail, as I am now.
Just one question for me. Just given like how the conversation about young voter turnout is getting more and more popular, what are your thoughts on that?
My initial thought is we'll see. Um, I mean, young voters are important, but they do not turn out as in as high levels as other, age brackets. So we'll see. They could be decisive, especially in places like some of the swing states with big universities. Um, but that's that's something that'll be an interesting thing to look at post election, in my opinion.
But I do think if they do turn out, I mean, if we do see like a large wave of young voter turnout, that might very well be the difference between a Trump or a Harris presidency. Like, there's so many different models that we've put out on states that, with polling, who's ahead and who's behind, but with young voters in particular, you just really don't know. And so I think we will see an uptick in young voter engagement. I think Harris has been really successful at getting young voters excited, at least more so than President Biden was. And they did prove to be quite important during the 2022 midterms. So I think in key states, especially if there's the right level of information and ballot access, particularly on college campuses, they really could have a serious impact. And I think that's why we're seeing so much about young voters this year, because I mean, they are a huge, huge block. It's just that it's harder to tell exactly where they're. I think it's less a decision of Democrat versus Republican, more than it is Democrat versus staying home. So yeah, like Brittany said, we'll just have to see.
Yeah. Let me just add one other to that. Sorry, I know we got to get out, but like, you look at a state like Michigan, where a lot of young people have been organizing around pro-Palestinian protests. Like, they might not turn out for Harris the way they did turn out in the midterms. Especially when Michigan there was an abortion referendum on the ballot. There are a lot of factors with young voters. Sorry, I just want to throw out that one more detail.
Yeah, and I would add, I mean, it's really something we just don't know, and it's kind of a difficult thing because young voters, if we're talking about 18 to 29, right? There's not decades of data to show what Gen Z is going to do. And we know that we've seen, of course, a higher turnout in 2022, but not necessarily higher than 2018, excuse me, in the midterms. And so I think with young voters, and if you all are doing any reporting and talking to people, the closer you get to election day, more and more people are saying that they're going to vote or they're inclined to vote. They've gotten their voting plan together now, 3 weeks out. Most people that you're going to be talking to, but young people especially. And 2 points on this, and I'll wrap up. One, young people especially, it's important to note that one. I'm so sorry, I don't know why I have emojis going on. Young people especially, it's important to note that one, young people are overwhelmingly more Democratic or have a propensity to support Democrats and Republicans. So you have some enthusiasm gap there between who's going to support who, or may support who versus young Republicans. But also young people in conversations that I've had, or even out here, tend to vote not just for themselves. Like, they're craving stability. They want a sense of where the economy is going. They want a sense of, safety for themselves, but the future, right? Climate change, right? Gun violence, some kind of, someone who can address, their maybe their bodily rights, or someone who is going to address how they're going to help them buy their first home, or how they're going to help them pay for their education. How they can advance themselves in this world, but also the people around them. And so I think, it always comes down to turnout. But there are also some young people who, again, are not happy with the way that Harris has positioned or not positioned herself on policies around Israel and Gaza, or are not quite convinced yet what she may do differently for Biden, or are, repulsed by some of the things that Trump has said or done. So it's really kind of iffy, but I think that young people are always going to play a big part in elections. And we know that because young people, Gen Z and millennials, are going to make up 40% of this electorate. So every vote counts. And I think each party is doing what they can to earn their vote.
Just one last question for me. When Biden dropped out of the race, how much of an impact would you say that had on like just how you go about reporting?
It changed everything. We had a totally different candidate in Harris, who many reporters had not spent much time with. Like, we knew Biden very well as the president and someone who was really struggling on the national stage for his reelection bid. Harris, I think, until she took the place atop the ticket, was thought of by many in the political press as untested, if not a flawed candidate or a flawed campaigner, and very quickly proved herself to be an incredible fundraiser. Definitely still someone who stayed on message and still has some kind of halting and odd turns of phrase, but really has surprised, I think, many of us with how she was able to coalesce a lot of the Democratic base behind her in the first couple weeks of her campaign. Of course, a lot of things have changed now. I think we're all a lot more comfortable covering her fully. We know her quite well, know her campaign, which is also basically the same as the Biden campaign. So we were like getting to know, we already knew the staffers, but many of them we had to just totally, I mean, some of them got new jobs and had sort of new fronts on their day to day. So we were also sort of learning alongside them. And now I think in these final weeks, it's just incredible to reflect on where we were, in mid-July, when Biden seemed to really be cratering with these key demographics. We thought it was going to be sort of a death march to like a very decisive Trump win. And now Harris has made it, I think, very much a fair fight, too close to call. No one really knows what's going to happen on November 5th. And it also just underlined and put in boldface the real unexpected nature of covering a presidential campaign. I don't think anyone's covered anything quite like this, but definitely I think now when those of us who have covered this race, when we say, you have to really expect anything, we really mean it now.
Yeah, I will say on Maya's point as well. I think we all remember where we were like July 21st. Like, and to see that he dropped out, I mean, it felt like one of those breakup texts. Like, that's just like, I can't believe it happened in a statement on Twitter, but like this is what he, did, and caught everyone. Inklings of it were in the air days before, but like the actual timing of when that was going to be happening kind of caught people by surprise, especially that format, not necessarily an address or a press conference presser immediately. And so of course it fundamentally changed the race, because up until this point we had been hearing on the ground, dissatisfaction or concern within the Democratic Party about the strength of Biden as a candidate, concerns around his age, concerns around his mental fitness, the same concerns as well that also some of these voters expressed about Trump's age, and his mental fitness and his ability to serve in the role, but so much more on the Democratic side. And it felt like a slow march to like the inevitable, a very long election, I think, for a lot of reporters for what we were seeing. The primary process this spring feels like an entirely different election, or a year at least, because it was an entirely different candidate. And so now with this kind of expedited run where Harris has, like 4 months to get to election day, build a coalition. I mean, it's not common for a nominee to kind of pick up the same staff and not only like boost enthusiasm, but pull in new groups, especially for a candidate who already was running to be a Democratic nominee and did not have the same kind of support when she was doing this back in 2020. And so it just shows you what a difference, even from going through to the second on the ticket to the top of the ticket, how much has changed, not just for Harris, but also for the Democratic Party and the voters who were possibly going to support Biden or on the fence about supporting a Democrat this year, or on the fence about supporting Trump at all or voting this election, has changed their minds and what has changed in their lives to now possibly support Harris or possibly sit this election out, or possibly support Trump. So everything changed.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add, but I like the breakup text analogy. That was pretty accurate.
All right, ladies.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. I'm sure myself and as well as our guests have learned a lot from you ladies about political journalism, and we really appreciate you coming out and speaking with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Bye.